Before Estêvão Willian ever stepped into a Premier League stadium, the football world had already whispered the same thing. This boy is different. Not hype, not marketing. Real football men, legends, saying things they haven't said in years. His first futsal coach said he nearly had a heart attack watching an 8-year-old dominate a session like an alien dropped on a school court. Neymar called him a genius in the making.
Estêvão do Palmeiras, acho que é grande talento que ele surgiu hoje no futebol brasileiro e eu acho que ele vai ser gênio.
Branco said he's the best Brazilian talent since Neymar, maybe even with a higher ceiling. Bebeto looked at him and thought of a young Ronaldo. Zico compared him to Lamine Yamal for his strength, intelligence, and feet that do things naturally. And on the pitch, you see exactly what they mean. Pundits say the same thing every time he comes on. They score early, then it goes flat. Then Estêvão enters and the entire tempo changes. A teenager lifting a stadium like a seasoned superstar. Lionel Messi swapped shirts with him. Luis Suarez did too. Abel Ferreira said he's different from everything I've coached. And Chelsea fans, they already call him the Prince. But this story isn't just about praise. It's about the pressure, the expectation, the areas he still needs to grow, and why so many believe he's built for greatness anyway. This is the day the football world started speaking about the sensational Estêvão Willian, and it only gets better from here. Before Europe chased his signature, before Neymar called him a genius, Estêvão Willian was just a quiet kid from Franca, raised on discipline, routine, and a belief that success starts with humility. His father was a pastor, his mother served in the church, and their home wasn't filled with football posters or trophies, just structure, prayer, and a sense of purpose. That environment shaped the boy who would later walk into a stadium of 40,000 people and play like he wasn't bothered by any of it. Everyone who knew him back then says the same thing. He never acted like a prodigy, but he always played like one. Barefoot on the streets, futsal courts, or school grounds, the ball stuck to his left foot in a way that didn't make sense for his age. One of his earliest coaches described the moment perfectly. He walked into training at 8 years old and the futsal coach almost had a heart attack. He controlled the entire session, north to south, east to west. We said he played like an alien with superpowers. Those weren't compliments thrown around lightly in Brazil. When a child stands out there, it's usually because he's fast or flashy. Estêvão stood out because he was calm, frighteningly calm. He never rushed, he never panicked, he never forced anything. That composure would later become his greatest weapon in Europe. By 11, Nike signed him, the youngest Brazilian they had ever given a contract to. At 14, Palmeiras recruited him because they saw what Cruzeiro had already realized. This wasn't just another talented kid. This was someone with the mental foundation to match the talent, and that foundation came from where his story started: the discipline of his home, the values of his church, and the self-control that made him different long before defenders struggled to keep up with him. For many players, the story begins when they go viral. With Estêvão, it began long before the world started watching, in the habits, humility, and mindset that would later convince legends to call him the next great Brazilian hope. By the time Estêvão Willian joined Cruzeiro's academy in 2017, the whispers had already begun. He wasn't treated like a typical 10-year-old talent. He was treated like a problem defenders needed a plan for. Small, quiet, graceful, but playing the game at a tempo nobody his age should have understood. Brazil has millions of dribblers. Estêvão was something different. A youth coach once said, he slows down when everyone else speeds up. Kids don't play like that unless they're special. And then came the moment that became academy folklore. During his first futsal session at Cruzeiro, the academy coordinator walked in. The coach pulled him aside, stunned, and said, "This boy is the boss here. He runs the whole court. I've never seen an 8-year-old dominate like this." That quote would later go viral because it captured the exact second Messinho was born. Not from a hype, not from marketing, but from the shock of adults realizing what they were looking at. And Brazil noticed fast. Clips of him gliding past defenders appeared online. Kids started mimicking his feints. Local tournaments suddenly stopped being tournaments. They became places where everyone waited for Estêvão to do something they'd never seen before. But while the clips made noise, he didn't. He stayed quiet, humble, focused. By 14, Cruzeiro couldn't contain him anymore. Palmeiras moved quickly, signing him in May 2021. And that was the turning point. That was when the nickname Messinho became less of a compliment and more of a warning, because at Palmeiras, he didn't just win games. He shaped them. Under 17 titles, national trophies, dominant youth campaigns where he didn't look like a kid. He looked like a conductor. Then came October 2023. The U17 national final, Palmeiras versus Sao Paulo, a title match, pressure everywhere. everywhere, and Estêvão scored all 3 goals. A hat trick at 16. Commentators said, Brazil hasn't seen a boy this decisive at this age since Neymar. European scouts flew in the next week. Madrid, Barcelona, PSG, because winning was starting to look effortless for him, and that's when the first wave of Brazilian legends started speaking. Branco, the man who once discovered Neymar, said, "He is the best Brazilian-born player I've seen since Neymar." Bebeto, World Cup champion, added, "He has everything to shine for Brazil." Zico, the master of Brazilian elegance, compared him to Lamine Yamal. They share the same intelligence and courage. Estêvão will do great things. 2 months later, he made his senior debut, 16 years old, 4th youngest in Palmeiras history, a league title sealed on his first professional night. Then came the Copa Libertadores goal, a curling left-footed strike against Liverpool Montevideo, making him one of the youngest scorers in the tournament's storied history. Then came Ronaldo Nazario, o Fenomeno, the gold standard for teenage talent, the man whose shadow every young Brazilian grows up under. Ronaldo watched Estêvão, smiled, and said plainly, "He is very talented, a very big star in the making." People forget how rare this is. Ronaldo doesn't praise lightly, he doesn't throw around compliments. For him to say those words at Estêvão's age is the footballing equivalent of a royal seal. Suddenly, it wasn't fans shouting Messinho on social media anymore. It was the 2 greatest attackers Brazil has produced in the last 30 years saying, "He's one of us, he's next." And just like that, Estêvão went from promising to inevitable. But here's the most important part, the part every Chelsea fan needs to understand. He didn't change, not even a little. While Neymar was praising him, Estêvão was still arriving early to training, still watching game footage in silence, still asking simple questions like a boy who was desperate to learn, not to be famous. Palmeiras staff noticed it. They said he had the maturity of a 25-year-old, calm, disciplined, never distracted by noise. That quiet confidence is what made the senior players trust him. By 17, he wasn't treated like a kid in the dressing room anymore. He was treated like someone who could decide a match. The legends weren't praising potential, they were recognizing themselves in him. Scouts wrote it in their reports. Commentators said it openly. This boy plays like he knows where his career is going. And they were right, because there are prospects, and then there are players who make the world stop and listen when giants speak their name. Estêvão Willian had officially become the latter. The whispers around Estêvão Willian had turned into discussions, and discussions into obsessions. Scouts weren't showing up quietly anymore. They were sitting in the front row with notebooks open, calling their clubs the moment he touched the ball. Real Madrid wanted him. Barcelona were monitoring every match. PSG were lining up directors on flights to Sao Paulo. But Chelsea moved faster, cleaner, smarter. On June 22nd, 2024, they agreed a deal worth $34 million, with bonuses pushing it towards $57 million, one of the largest fees ever paid for a South American teenager. But FIFA rules meant he had to stay in Brazil until his 18th birthday. The moment that agreement was signed, every Palmeiras match felt different. It felt like Brazil was counting down to an arrival Europe wasn't prepared for. And then football gave us the most perfect theater imaginable. The 2025 FIFA Club World Cup, Palmeiras versus Chelsea, quarterfinal. A club that had already bought him now had to face him. 90 minutes where Estêvão wasn't Chelsea's future, he was Chelsea's problem, and he didn't blink. In the second half, he drifted inside from the right, created half a yard of space, and unleashed a strike so fierce it rattled the crossbar and crashed in. A goal of pure confidence, pure instinct, pure Brazilian flair. The teenager had just scored a world-class goal against the team he was about to join, on one of the biggest stages of his young life. Chelsea won the match 2-1, but the headlines? They weren't about Chelsea, they were about him. The kid Chelsea already owned just reminded them why. Even Enzo Maresca, normally measured and composed, was caught smiling in his post-match interview. He belongs on the biggest stages, he said, a sentence that spread like wildfire across English media. From that night forward, the tone changed. Estêvão Willian wasn't a prospect anymore. He was a signing that had already passed his audition, and that wasn't even the end. His farewell year at Palmeiras became something out of a film. 27 goals, 15 assists, 83 appearances. A teenager dominating a league known for its physicality, pressure, and unforgiving atmosphere. He scored winners in tight matches, handled Libertadores crowds like a seasoned pro, moved between the lines as if he had played senior football for a decade. Even inside Palmeiras, players said something unusual about him. He plays like he knows where he's going, because he did. The quiet boy from Franca was heading for one of the biggest clubs in world football, and he was arriving not as a wonder kid, but as a weapon. In July 2025, Palmeiras gave him a farewell that felt more like a tribute to a club icon than an 18-year-old leaving for Europe. A standing ovation, tears, prayers, flags. It was a goodbye that carried one message.
Para Estêvão, tremenda figura.
Go and show the world what we already know. And when he finally boarded the plane to London, he wasn't leaving home behind. He was bringing Brazil with him. Not the nickname, not the hype, but the belief. Belief from Palmeiras, belief from Brazil, belief from legends like Neymar and Ronaldo. Europe had watched him on screens. Scouts had written glowing reports. Chelsea had invested heavily. But now they were about to meet the real thing. A teenager arriving with the calmness of a man who'd been preparing for this moment his entire life. And Chelsea weren't welcoming a prospect. They were welcoming the beginning of a new era. When Estêvão Willian finally stepped into Cobham in the summer of 2025, the cameras didn't have to force the excitement. Chelsea fans had been waiting 14 months for this moment. His "Here We Go" had already gone viral the year before. His Club World Cup masterclass had raised the expectations even higher. And his 27-goal, 15-assist season in Brazil had turned anticipation into certainty. But his arrival wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was humble. Just like him. Wearing the number 41, the same number he wore at Palmeiras, he posed shyly with Maresca and shook hands with the staff like he had been preparing for this moment since childhood. And then, only 12 days later, he got his first taste of English football, August 17th, 2025. Premier League debut, Chelsea 0-0, Crystal Palace. He didn't score, he didn't assist, but he changed the rhythm immediately. Every time he touched the ball, the stadium leaned forward. Palace defenders stopped stepping high. Chelsea's tempo lifted. Pundits said afterward, "You can see why they waited a year for him." 4 days later, the real welcome arrived. August 21st, 2025, first Premier League start, Chelsea 5-1 West Ham. At 18 years old, Estêvão delivered his first goal contribution in England, a cleverly weighted pass into Enzo Fernandez, slicing through West Ham's narrow block. His dribbling stats from that match, 4 successful take-ons, 100% pass completion in the final third, 1 assist created from open play, numbers that simply don't happen for players adapting to a new league, let alone teenagers. Commentators couldn't ignore it. He plays like he's already seen this level before. But the moment that truly announced him to England didn't come in a comfortable win. It came when Chelsea needed a hero. October 4th, 2025, Chelsea versus Liverpool, 95th minute winner. In a tight, tense game at Stamford Bridge, the ball fell to Estêvão after a quick exchange between Enzo Fernandez and Cucurella. 1 touch to settle, 1 twist to lose his marker, and 1 calm finish into the far corner. 95th minute against Liverpool at the Bridge. That goal made him Chelsea's youngest Premier League scorer that season, one of the youngest Brazilians ever to score in England, the teenager who silenced Liverpool in front of a global audience. Even Rio Ferdinand tweeted, "This kid is serious." But he was just getting started. October 22nd, 2025, Chelsea versus Ajax Champions League debut goal, a penalty, 5 minutes in, 18 years, 181 days old. He became the youngest Champions League scorer in Chelsea's history, breaking a record held for more than a decade. What impressed coaches more than the goal? His body language. He took the ball himself. No nerves, no hesitation, just a deep breath and a precise finish. He didn't look like a teenager making his European debut. He looked like he belonged. On November 8th, 2025, Chelsea's 3-0 win over Wolves looked routine on paper, but anyone who watched it knows the match changed the moment Estêvão Willian stepped onto the pitch. Chelsea were controlling possession, but struggling to break Wolves' shape. Then, midway through the second half, Maresca pointed to the bench, and the stadium lifted instantly. Within minutes of coming on, Chelsea's tempo jumped from medium to electric. Wolves stopped pressing high because he kept slipping into pockets behind them, and the atmosphere around Stamford Bridge shifted. You could feel expectation again, and this time he didn't just change the rhythm, he changed the scoreboard. A clever run with the ball allowed him to burst down the right flank, cut inside with that trademark control, and slide a perfect pass across the box for João Pedro finish. A simple assist, but the kind elite wingers make look effortless. It wasn't a lucky touch, it was a teenager reading the whole game 2 steps ahead. After the match, Opta released a stat that summed up his influence. He completed more progressive carries in 23 minutes than any Chelsea player had produced in the entire first half, and created more chances than Wolves did all game. That's when pundits stopped calling him a project and started calling him a problem. for defenders. Chelsea look a different team the moment he steps in. He speeds the game up without losing control. By mid-November, his numbers across all competitions for club and country were already telling a story. 10 matches, 7 goals, 2 assists, top 5 at Chelsea for dribbles completed per 90, top 5 for progressive carries per 90. These aren't prospect numbers, they're impact metrics, the kind you see from players who tilt the match immediately just by entering it. Even Enzo Maresca, normally cautious with praise, couldn't hide it anymore. He gives us intelligence, calmness, and bravery. That combination is very rare for his age. And the fans, they were already singing his name during warm-ups. The new kid with the quiet voice and the fearless left foot. Chelsea didn't sign a wonder kid, they signed a spark, the kind that turns tight games into victories. The boy they signed for the future was suddenly becoming one of the most influential players in their present.